Today's guest is Jon Isaacson. He's a restoration operations expert and a podcast host. So, Jon, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Tats.
Yeah, so I followed your stuff for a while. Your sort of day to day is in restoration, and then you have this content side that you've always been a fan of. How did that develop?
Well, I sat down and I said I want to be like Tats, so I got active on social media. So no, honestly, my comfort zone is I enjoy writing, I enjoy reading, so I enjoy writing, and I had started writing some articles for some of the publications in our industry in property restoration. Which for those that don't know, that's like fancy word for dealing with insurance claims, right? And on the contracting side. And so as that progressed, a lot of people encourage, a way, not as many people maybe read nowadays. And so if you create some videos, maybe that would help get some of the content out there. So I don't know how far back you've watched, but I used to make real cringy videos in my garage. When did you start making videos? Your
I mean,
first backdrop and everything?
well, I started it with the podcast because I just
Okay.
hated the idea of being on video.
Okay.
And I've gotten to a point where I just feel like we're on a Zoom call, but it was horrible. I was just robotic. And, I used to
Yeah.
do like TV interviews too.
Okay.
And the only reason they called me to do interviews is because they couldn't find anyone better. Because I narrowed the niche enough that there was just no one else they could call. So I would get the call, and I have some of these up as a reminder to me, but they were horrible, and they just couldn't get any better. So for me, it started with audio, like doing
Okay.
podcasts, and then I just kept hearing over and over, you need to be on video. So like you, I started. So tell me about these cringy videos. Like what were you saying? What was the message?
Oh man. Well, I had in our industry, there's this estimating software, and I'm sure that's all contracting has some form of estimating software, right? So we have one that's called Exactimate, and that was kind of hit early on. Some threads with that, just ways to optimize using that program, and then some of the inconsistencies. A lot of people complain that the technicians from the field don't give the documentation to the people that are writing the estimates. But when you wind that back a little bit, a lot of times the way we dispatch people is we got a call, go. And there's no details. So you start a process with very bad details and documentation, but expect the inline employees are the ones that get the brunt of all of the discipline for not providing what is actually a continuation of a poor start of events. So
Oh,
we
yeah,
respond to chaos, but we shouldn't have internal chaos.
yeah. So I'm interested in that because I think, when there's a process, for us, I think of like warranty or project specification things, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like there's no communication, and then there's a sudden rush to get everything done,
Yep.
and where's the information? So
Yep.
is that the case? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, ours is it remind me, I think your core business is roofing, is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah. So the roof fails, right? One of your competitors installs a substandard roof, and it fails, right? And then so companies in our industry would be the ones like maybe somebody calls their insurance company, or they call somebody to come dry it out, or there's all this water pouring in to the structure. So that has definitely a level of urgency to it, right? And can feel chaotic, but we should still be okay. What is your address? Who's getting us access to the building? What insurance company are you working with? Because that sets your employees, the people that are responding, better up to go out. I would imagine the same, if it's a warranty, having that data on file to know, okay, we installed this type of roof, so we need to bring this tool set, and maybe this person in our company is the best suited for that particular application. And so it's
Yeah.
the same, like we have water damage, we have fire damage, we have mold, we have bio, and so if somebody's better at what that customer needs,
Yeah.
in everybody's best interest to send those people if they're available, right?
Yeah. So how do you reinforce that, or how do you like put in processes to make that collection and that handoff better?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's tricky because you got a lot, just like in roofing, you have a lot of smaller companies where somebody's wearing all of the hats, right? But it's almost, even at that level, it's as important, if not more important, because your time is so much more valuable, right? So when a client calls in, and I would say we're in a phase right now, a period in construction in general in the skilled trades where there's a good amount of work, right? That's not really the issue. It's more applying your efforts and your resources to the right kind of work. So that's important to, okay, do we have the details? Is this customer actually ready for our services? Are they just kind of calling around, kicking the tires, wanting, bids? And we just did a series on our podcast on the myth of free estimates, and so I think you just have to, as a contractor, be willing to say my time is valuable, and I need to make sure I'm applying it to the right projects, so that way, we're getting paid at the end of the day for what we do, rather than spending 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours chasing work that's not going to materialize. So I think that's the first, willing to say this process is broken or could be better. And am I actually willing to peel back a little bit and make it better in the long run so that I'll be happier at work and more profitable, and our employees aren't wanting to pull their hair out.
Yeah, yeah. So, when I was just listening to that, I feel like there's three parts. First of all, like, every organization is resource strapped in some way, even a massive organization.
Yep.
So, properly qualifying opportunities,
Yeah.
saying no to the right things, being involved in the right type of projects, step one. Step two is, understanding, it sounds like, your process and how you can improve that process to
Yeah.
streamline it. And the third thing I think you touched on slightly was the fact that when you do collect the information up front, you're actually saving time. Like a lot
Yeah.
of people skip
Yeah.
steps to try to save time, but
Yeah.
the back and forth on the back end actually takes you more time and more
Yeah.
headaches, so that you're actually saving time by doing it right the first time.
Man, that's a great point. Yeah. Well, and reducing frustration, right? And yeah, because I think, yeah, when you're resource strapped, it's all that much important that you apply it to the right things.
Yeah, for sure. So how does the content side, which I think you call your podcast the dojo?
Diojo. Yep.
Dojo, okay. So tell
Yep.
me about, and how does it relate to stuff you're doing? Because you've sort of gone from the industry side, and then you've sort of added a personal development layer, which I kind of think is there. How does that all come together with your day to day?
Yeah. So the podcast is, I mean, skilled trades, construction, and obviously kind of this niche of property restoration. But I started writing articles for the industry, just sharing some of the things that I felt worked or improved some of the processes. Started making some videos to try to coordinate with those articles, and then when the shutdowns happened in 2020, on our side of the industry, there was just a lot. I felt like there's kind of a lot of poor information around some of the cleanup and prevention activities. And so, and a lot of the information was, from within the hive, rather than hearing some of the voices outside of our industry. And so that was just reaching out to get different perspectives from some people on ways to approach that, because it's kind of a new thing, right, for us in this, the liability, the risk, the cleanup, what is actually maybe providing value to customers and what isn't. And so that I've starting out our podcast was 3 questions with the pro, and it was only YouTube videos. And I reached out to another friend, Jarrett Steer, who does the GMS podcast. He has an electric box that'll plug into the dryer or the range vent, and provide more power. So it's a great application for our industry when people are drying and need more power. and he uses Spotify, and so I was able to basically take that same video file, drop it in there. Now I have the audio only and the video, and so we've been cranking out mediocre podcasts since 2020 to the 13 people that listen. So
Yeah, I know. I once joked that my family doesn't even listen, right? But I mean, for me, I started just because I wanted to learn, right? And it seems
Sure.
like you had the same thing where you wanted to learn and
Yep.
grow yourself through, asking experts in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm sure you found too, formed some relationships that otherwise wouldn't have been created, and open some doors. You might get a kick out of this. The actual idea for the podcast, I was working for an abatement company, and we were brainstorming ways to try to reach out to general contractors that would use our service that we couldn't get to. Hey, can we bring coffee by? Can we meet for lunch? And weren't getting anywhere. And I said, well, what if we did a podcast, and all would have to, if you were my target, right? Instead of saying, "Hey, can we get coffee? Can we get lunch? Can we go out to dinner? Will you go to this baseball game with me?" I said, "Hey, will you jump on Zoom and we'll do a video call, and all I want you to do is talk about all the great things that your company does." I was like, "This podcast would not have to have any viewers to be successful because it got me a face to face with the target client." And it didn't land right. They didn't understand the premise, or well, what? And it was like, it's such a low barrier. Like, you need a microphone and a crappy video camera or whatever's already on your computer, and boom, you've got a podcast, right? And so that was the initial impetus for starting a podcast. And I think you'd probably say the same. I'd encourage any company that wants to use it for some kind of outreach. I mean, it's free to do, other than the time, and it's a great way to get some content out that might not otherwise be out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of these insights you gained? I mean, one of the things you touched on was the free estimates. So it sounds like a hot button, but what other, besides that, we can talk about that. But what other things did you learn? Because I've had podcasts where I literally, after I do it, I just feel like I'm somehow like it's opened up a different part of my brain.
Yeah,
So what
yeah,
were those moments, that you had recording these episodes over the years?
yeah. I'm trying to think. I mean, all in all, like, like they say, science says matter is neither created nor destroyed, right? And I think knowledge is much the same. We uncover these things that are, we're part of an age old tradition of, let's build that. How do we do that better? So where it lasts. And history shows us that some of the people with much more archaic tools have still done a much better job than we ever have in modern civilization of building things that last. And so a lot of it's just hearing somebody's different perspective. I think that's probably the most interesting, is not so much success, but if you can get those in betweens of, like, the failure, or it was almost on the brink of failure, and how people kind of climb through that. So that's always fun. For me personally, one of the biggest nuggets or things that I'm very interested in, the history of our industry and how it developed. And so doing the podcast and writing the articles has really opened up a lot of doors in that realm to meet with people that were pivotal in kind of helping move our industry forward and up into where it is today.
Yeah. I mean, what were some of those historical nuggets, like those turning points or those innovations or whatnot?
Well, I mean, you think about it, like when I answered an ad for carpet cleaning at a Service Master franchise in California, and they said, with your background in science, because I was studying to go into law enforcement at the time, they said you'd be really good at mold remediation. I had no idea what that was, right? And I was like, yeah, I think I would be pretty good at it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. You have a job for me?
but and then you learn, there's initially, like most things in the trades, just the physical aspect of it, right? Just go move this pile there, and then, hey, here's this tool that helps you do that better, and then, hey, here's actually the science behind what we do, and then here's opportunities to do other things. And so like recently released a small part, a pivotal figure in our industry, a guy named Lloyd Weaver. So it's almost taken for granted that we have air movers today, and really he took a centrifugal fan, I think I'm saying that right, out of an HVAC system, the fan that cycles
Yeah,
the
yeah.
air through your home, took it out and made it in an application where it could blow air against a wall or under a carpet. And it was, so looking back, it's like, well, yeah, anyone could have done that. Yeah, but someone did, and then others came behind them and made them, much prettier, and maybe did a better job of selling them. But it took one person to say, wait, I could take this and I could do that with it, and now, we're testing a theory and making it into something, which is pretty wild.
Yeah. Tell me about some of the books that you put out. Did you put out 1 or 2? I'm trying to remember.
I actually, on the fourth mediocre book,
Oh, you got 4. Sorry.
uh,
I turn
hard to keep
around and
up.
look
Yeah,
away
yeah,
for a second and
yep.
poof, you have 4. So tell me about 4 books. Not everyone has 4 books.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe, and maybe some people shouldn't be writing them, so I got the first one was an estimating book, and it's more not like nuts and bolts of estimating, but really if somebody wants to get into estimating, you're in the field and you're saying, what would it take to do that job? That's kind of the spirit of that book. The second book is on workplace culture, and the idea was I got some fellow authors just to share what's one simple thing that's been helpful in your business to shape your culture positively, and then ask them to share one time when they tried something that just kind of blew up in their face or didn't work. um, the third one is, so you want to be a project manager, and similar to the first book, kind of, if you're in the field and you want to get into project management, it goes a little more into or quite a bit more into the nuts and bolts than the first book. Um, and then the last book I just released was How to Suck Less at Estimating. And it's got 6 tools in there. I think that'll be helpful. It's obviously geared towards our industry, but I think estimators in general would benefit from it, or somebody interested in estimating. And that actually, Restoration Technical Institute just released it as a course that people can take. So,
Huh.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, interesting. So, um, the podcast you mentioned has certain advantages of learning and meeting people and stuff like that. But tell me about book publishing. Like, what has it done for you? Was it just an outlet? You had this idea, you wanted to get it out, or did it like maybe it started that way, but did it? Obviously that sort of course is sort of a byproduct. But what are the other things that come out of it?
Yeah, I kind of, like I said, I like to write, so I had written articles, so I'd always kind of thought I'd really like to write a book, and I'd like to have something that I feel is of value that would make sense to be in a book. I don't know if you heard of Unqualified Success by Rachel Stewart.
No, tell me about that.
It's a really good book. It's probably from on the personal development side. She's from our industry. She was general manager and I believe VP at Titan Restoration out of Arizona, and now she's got a software company. Um, and I had reached out to her. My wife actually read the book as well, and just saying, "Man, this is one of the best books I've read from our industry, but on this topic in general." And I had shared with her, I was like, "I'd love to write a book. I just don't feel like I have anything unique to say." And kind of that same idea of knowledge, it's kind of neither created nor destroyed. She was like, nobody has anything really unique to say. It's all been said. It's your unique perspective and how you've applied the knowledge, right, to either be successful or really fail in a fantastic way. And so that was pretty liberating to hear. And I think about that same time, um, or shortly after, one of my articles, I wrote an article, The 10 Commandments of Exactimate Estimating Success. And in one of the trade magazines, it was like top 3 articles for the year. And so it just kind of little light bulb, like, okay, here's a topic that maybe is touching a nerve or is helpful to people. and maybe I can kind of build off of that. So I just kind of expanded some of the content from that article and added some of the other articles that supplemented it. And so that's where the book was born.
Yeah.
As far as I don't know about you, Tats, but like, our podcast doesn't make a lot of money, and the books don't either. You're in that self publishing, self promoting, and so there's a lot of times where it's just like, why do you even do this? But every now and again, I'll get an email or a text or a message from somebody that said, "Hey, this was really helpful," or "I really appreciated this," or even, "Hey, what you said here was really stupid," but it confirms, somebody's reading it or getting a hold of the content, and it's making a difference. And sounds corny or cheesy, but that's just enough to say, okay, one more. We'll do one more podcast, so
Well, the bar is really high, right? If
yeah,
you want, you can't just kind of dabble into turning it into a media company. Everyone loves to talk about media companies, but
yeah,
turning them into them is like a full-time thing.
yeah. Well, when and how did your podcast get started?
Well, for me, I really wanted to, there's a lot of things I didn't know. Like I wanted to be a better entrepreneur, and also within construction, roofing, coatings, or whatever. I really didn't find one person that knew
Mm,
um, everything that I needed to know.
sure.
And so that was the start of it, which is
Yeah,
just getting guests to learn that, and and trying to get more and more knowledgeable. And after a while, the general information starts to become not as useful.
sure.
But in the very beginning, that's what is it. There was so much I didn't know, and I just
Yeah,
needed to get up on the curve on it. And as it's gone forward, it's more like, well, it's learning for me, but what's helpful for others, and I've tried to hone it to what's helpful for others. But
yeah,
I mean, you mentioned something that was really interesting. Is I don't I read the book Unqualified Success, but I mean, I like trying to help people and like trying to post content about it.
yep,
But
yep,
you post content about it and you try to, like, here's the right thing, or here's what you want to aspire to do. And the thing that gets me is that that same day or that same week, you're having the same issue with
yeah,
that
yeah,
advice
yeah.
you give. You're like,
Yep, yep,
no, you still want to put it out, but sometimes it's just like,
yeah.
we're all trying to improve, right? Whether it's learning through creating or trying to help, right?
The project management book, I think the week, it might have been the day that I submitted it basically to be published through Amazon. A customer just ate my lunch, and they were right, about some things where I had dropped the ball and hadn't done the best job of communicating. This is like, here I am writing this book, that no one's going to read about project management, and exactly like you're saying, like I'm still fumbling, constantly. And so, yes, that's very, very true. Um, but that, what's hard, do you find this hard? You're at where you are in your career, so there's certain things that you take for granted that maybe you skip over. And I try to be very conscious of just like industry speak, right? If we have a guest and they're, okay, can you explain that? Because you got to remember, some people listening may have never occurred to them, some of the things that you take as foundational, or just, this is just the way that you do it,
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. Especially the things where it's like, hey, this seems so obvious, or no one would get any value from it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Just and then you just maybe you just don't have anything to put out, you throw it out there. And
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
you learn, like, it's the most valuable thing you put out all month, right?
yep,
And
yep.
you just discounted it because you've somehow just, the way you
So
perceive it.
small, or yeah, yeah, yep. We hear that, like, some rock bands and stuff like that, like some of their songs have become the most popular, they almost come to hate or whatnot, because they're like, well, we just, man, that took us 15 minutes to throw together, whereas this song over here is one that we were really proud of, and commercially nobody really liked it, so
Like, doing a ton of stuff, and then, in different places, and then seeing what works, and
yeah,
then keep doing more of that doesn't make a very good book.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting component is, you have to play the Google, Amazon, YouTube, internet game to get content in front of people, right? So there's learning kind of what pieces hit to where it even gets in front of people, because then the content's got to be engaging. But if it never reaches anybody, then it's like, well, you have the greatest engaging podcast or book or whatever, but nobody knows about it because maybe your title's wrong or something like that. And I think sometimes I think like I've gotten crafty, the title's right, and I've got the right things embedded in the headers and the right hashtags, and then it just goes nowhere. And then sometimes you just like throw something out there, and all of a sudden it's got 1,000+ views or something. And you're like, okay, this doesn't make sense.
It's okay.
So,
Google just does that to troll you.
yeah, probably. Oh, they're starting to get some success. Boop, shut off. Yeah, close the dam. Yeah, yeah. I think I saw a while back, you had, I think you express yourself as an introvert kind of by nature, but you pushed yourself to do stand-up comedy.
Oh yeah.
Are you still doing that, or was that a while back?
It was one time. The idea behind it was that, hey, look, I was taking some coaching on storytelling, and they
Okay.
were pushing me to try to do stuff humor. And this is not, I wasn't doing it very publicly. We are just kind of doing it in the background, and we're
Yeah.
just like posting videos internally, like between my coach and me, and I had this moment. Later it was like, I'm happy I did it,
Sure.
but I just like had this moment where I just reached out to a local coach and said, "Hey, I want some coaching, right? Private coaching."
Yeah.
And then I show up. We're having a meeting, and she goes, "In 3 weeks, there's an open mic thing, and you're doing it, right?
Oh,
No
wow.
question." And before I had the fear kicked in, I said yes. I don't know if there's a reflex because she was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
very, very convincing, and I regretted it as soon as I said it. And then for 3 weeks, I didn't sleep.
Oh,
It's
man.
like,
Okay. Oh,
but I'm
no.
so glad I did it.
Huh. That's awesome. Well, were you reaching out to the coach for something in particular?
Well, I wanted just private lessons, right? Like I
Okay.
hear that on the side, I was gonna do some private. So, I met up for the first session. I thought, you know what, I can just kind of work on in the background. And she's like, not gonna do it. You need to do this live. And I learned what real feedback is like. Like when you're just talking about normal feedback, you can sometimes be nice about stuff, right?
Yeah.
But in comedy, it's either funny or it's not. There's
Yeah.
just no middle ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as a marketer, I'm thinking like I can kind of write. I'm not a good writer, but I know well enough to write marketing copy. And I
Yeah.
wrote it and I'm all proud of myself. And she goes, not funny. And I'm like, okay, okay. I rewrite it again. I feel like I'm improved, not fun. Like I rewrote it like 6 or 7 times, and
Oh, yeah.
she said, "Okay, this might get a laugh, right?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's got this kind of like really black and white feel to it, right? There's
Yeah.
no way to be nice about it. It's either funny or it's not. And to stand up in front of a crowd with the expectation of being funny and delivering is terrifying.
Yeah. Well, yeah, how do you connect and so many different personalities? I think it makes me think of, when you posted that too, I've listened to some comedians talk about how, by the time they get to a set, right, something that maybe they're going to record, it's gone through the process you went through multiple times for crash, crash, crash. Okay, that got a little bit of a response. Let's tweak it. So it's not like even the comedians, obviously they're probably better at it now if they've been doing it for 20 years, but it's not like they just write it down all of a sudden it's instantly funny. It has to be tested. The timing comes into play. The temperature of the room, obviously probably certain things play different in different areas. Yeah, pretty wild. And then thinking about that from a podcast level, or even like writing, marketing copy, a blog or an article, a book, and a podcast, like the same content, you can't just take the same content and it transfers to all those things. Like each of those things has unique kind of cadences and different ways of getting your message across
Yeah.
effectively.
But I mean, when you're interviewing a lot of people, I've noticed this a bit. I bet your ability to like pull from different people's experiences and troubleshoot has grown.
Probably, I would hopefully so. Yeah, yeah, hopefully so.
You get because you get to hear everyone's like, you know,
Yeah.
oopses and learnings and stuff like that.
Well, I don't know about you, but certain guests come with an agenda, right? And then they're going there, and one of the more difficult things is, wait a minute, you want to go here, and I've got to give you some liberty to express that. And ours, I do a lot of editing, so I have an advantage of, if I don't want to roll it, I can cut it out. But finding that little piece that they talk about and saying, okay, this is really, I think, what would be interesting to the audience, or maybe to me. So let's rewind, and I want to draw that piece out, a little bit. And I think that's, but in business or in life, finding, where do our values intersect, and trying to draw that and build on that, right? So that way we can achieve a common goal or a common outcome, clarify that, and achieve it. So
Yeah. No, that's very cool. Is there anything that I did not ask you, but you wanted to cover or share?
no, man. I mean, thank you for having me on, and for the conversation, and for what you're doing in and for the skilled trades. I know you do a lot behind the scenes, but anything we can do to help get the word out and bring the next generations in, and people to understand that there's good work, good opportunities, and money to be made. And it's so crazy, even talking to my own kids, like some of the smallest things will set you up for success in this industry and any industry, right? Just doing the basics really well can go a long way.